Shalom, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at the second annual Pulse of Israel conference in our beautiful biblical ancestral homeland, Israel, in our beautiful biblical and indivisible capital, Jerusalem, since King David's time. This conference is taking place in the middle of an existential war that our holy I was hoping it would be easier than this. That our holy IDF soldiers are currently mostly fighting right now in Gaza and also preparing possibly to fight up north in Lebanon as well. However, for those who really understand, we're really talking about a 7-front war against a Shiite Iran and a Sunni Qatar Muslim Brotherhood alliance to literally destroy Israel. And it's not just our war, but a war of good against evil for humanity, where we, the Jewish people here in Israel, are literally the front line of the whole freedom-loving world against an emboldened Marxist Islamist revolution out to destroy the whole freedom-loving world, with the United States actually as its main target. What are we? Well, that's why the protests on the U.S. college campuses today also include messages about supporting the destruction of America, which Iran has been clear for decades about destroying, as well as they call America the big Satan and Israel little Satan. We, the Jewish people in Israel, we're just the appetizer, the canary in the coal mine, with our holy IDF soldiers fighting on the physical front line as the leaders of the freedom-loving world ignore this reality and tie Israel's hands behind our back in trying to end this war to protect us all. And all this while we also still have captives in Gaza. Before we begin, I just want to ask Hashem to look over our holy IDF soldiers, assist them in achieving complete victory over our enemies, so that the Jewish people never again experience another rocket attack or terror attack ever again, and that He watch over all of our captives in Gaza so that we can bring them all home as soon as possible. I first want to thank my whole staff working hard on this conference and highlight my partner Avi Nadel, Rachel Moore and her staff for organizing the conference, our interns, my wife Rachel for everything, my parents for everything, my children, and to Hashem above for everything. On a personal note, this conference takes place as my wife and I have 2 sons fighting in Gaza right now. 2 sons. Who are part of a generation of proud Jewish King David-like warriors, a generation of heroes, a generation that demands victory, literally paying the price, risking their own lives, paying that price for the mistakes, weakness, appeasement, weakening of the Jewish identity and sense of purpose of previous generations of Israeli and Jewish leaders. I think it is quite clear that the war we are fighting today would not have happened if not for the mindset that led to the disastrous Oslo Peace Accords of 1993, that many of our political, military, and community organizational leaders around the world are still stuck in, unable to pull us out of. To me, it never made sense to give guns and land to a sworn enemy with literal Jewish blood on their hands, while ignoring what they say in their native Arabic language to their own. Shimon Peres and his band of Oslo merry men were right about one thing, that you make peace with your enemy, but they were totally wrong about its application. You only do so after you defeat your enemy so bad that they then come begging to surrender under your terms with no expectation of even being able to make any demands. You definitely do not give those enemies guns and land to continue their genocidal agenda to destroy you. Israel still has not had that victory over our enemies, making sure that they understand that the Jewish state of Israel is here to stay, with no chance of them achieving our destruction. That is what is needed at the end of the current fighting of today's war, which, as I like to tell people, is really the 77th year of our war of independence, because the 1948 war never ended. We're still fighting it. Every few years it is a new battle with changes to the faces and names for the enemy, but it is the same war with the same enemy, a segment of the Arab-Muslim world unable to accept the reality of a Jewish state back sovereign in our ancestral homeland. The sad truth is that the Oslo peace process was really never about trying to even achieve peace. Ron Pundak, one of the architects of the Oslo peace process, stated himself in an interview back in 2014 that the Oslo peace process was really about Israelizing Israel, in a sense, to stop Israel from turning too Jewish. That also explains Shimon Peres's line after he lost the 1996 elections to Benjamin Netanyahu, when Shimon Peres famously said, "The Israelis lost that election and the Jews won." Ultimately, beyond the physical war our sons, husbands, friends, neighbors, fathers are fighting right now, we are experiencing a spiritual war, a battle that we are winning, as more Jews in Israel and around the world are strengthening their Jewish identity, strengthening their connection to their ancestral homeland Israel, and strengthening their understanding of the importance of a thriving Israel as a strong Jewish country. It is just so sad that it has taken the horrible massacre of Simchat Torah, October 7th, 2023, and the growing Jew-hating anti-Semitism in its wake for the growth of this spiritual process we are going through right now. That is the internal spiritual war that is the undercurrent of the physical war. And that is why I tell people in my daily Pulse of Israel program that we are ultimately winning this war, and we will win it. Because the Jewish people today are stronger and more united than ever before in our identity as a proud Jewish people and in our joint sense of national purpose in our ancestral homeland. And despite the challenges that are still to come, the trajectory is a positive one, and we will win. The sooner more Jews join in understanding our true purpose and vision, we will achieve total victory in the physical war and bring in the future a proud and strong Jewish state of Israel. Despite the crazy, traumatic times that we are living in, we, the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland Israel, have a bright and strong future ahead of us. And that is exactly what our focus is going to be tonight. So thank you to each and every one of you for joining us here in the Begin Center in Jerusalem, and everyone watching all over the world, wherever you are, and we have people watching from countries all over the world, to join with us tonight in hearing, spreading, and sharing this message. This year's conference is about next steps, Israel's roadmap to true independence. Why are we focusing on this topic this year? Well, for two reasons. Reason number one, unfortunately, it is clear to see that Israel does not have the diplomatic independence or geopolitical flexibility to win this war properly in order to protect us. With a Biden administration constantly acting as the negotiator for Hamas and Iran and pressuring Israel to constantly appease those evil actors instead of doing the opposite, it is clear that we are far from having the independence necessary to protect Israeli civilians. And that is a problem that our leaders must be focused on fixing as soon as possible. Reason number two, because personally, I'm tired of seeing a majority of official voices for the state of Israel and the Jewish people focus 99.9% of their time on trying to defend Israel against the daily barrage of lies pushed out by our enemies and pumped out by media channels and politicians all over the world. Israel and the Jewish people must go on the offense and stop the focus on hasbara, trying to explain away the daily lies. It is way past time that the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel focus on providing a steady and strong offense with a vision of strength, based on our proud Jewish historic identity connected to our ancestral homeland, and cut down at the knees the narrative of lies piled against us on a daily basis. Only by constantly providing a proud offense and standing up for ourselves will we spare spokespeople and laymen the time of having to run around looking for the facts to disprove the constant barrage of lies. I will give one simple example. Anytime Israel is blamed and shamed for killing non-combatants in Gaza, there should only be one response from the IDF, from Israeli government officials, and from Jewish organizations and influencers. Not, we will look into it. Not, we take responsibility and, if necessary, we'll punish the IDF soldiers involved. And not by saying, well, say that the numbers are unreliable, since they come from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which we all know are Hamas, and hence unreliable. No. All those claims force Jews worldwide to play defense, and force us to play defense, and let Hamas off the hook. There's only one response, and that is, don't you dare blame Israel for anyone killed in Gaza. 100% of the blame lies with Hamas. This is a war started by Hamas, who use their own non-combatants as human shields, continue to do so. They started this war by infiltrating Israel and massacring over 1,200 innocent Israelis on October 7th. And they can end this war, and this is all part of the message we're supposed to be giving our officials, all by doing one thing, surrendering all their weapons and returning our captives. Anyone interested in ending the death of non-combatants in Gaza should pressure their governments and their journalists to start reporting the truth and pressure Hamas to surrender and release our captives. That is the only way to stop people from being killed in this war started by Hamas. That should have been the only response of every single IDF, Israeli government, Jewish organizational spokesperson, influencer since day one. Yet it wasn't, and still today, 9 months into this war, it still hardly is. This is why our conference this year is focused on going on the offense, by providing a roadmap for a proud and strong Israel with the inspiring, politically incorrect truth that people are starving to hear. And believe it or not, one of the people out there who is saying this truth proudly happens not even to be Jewish, and his name is Douglas Murray. And another person who happens to be saying this also unapologetically happens to be Jewish, thank God, and he is with us tonight, and that is Michael Rappaport. And who are we? We are the pulse of Israel, on the front line of the media war for Israel, providing hope by sharing the inspiring, politically incorrect truth that is sorely lacking in the public sphere, in the Jewish sphere, in the Israel sphere. Now, I want everyone to come tonight with an open mind, because we have all been trained to think realistically. And that realistic thinking has been literally killing us since the disastrous Oslo Accords were signed in 1993, and continues to lead to Jews being killed every day. And stay with me. We were trained to believe that giving guns, land, and money to known terror entities is the realistic path to peace. We were trained to think that appeasing terrorists and terror organizations and literally financing them to pay terrorists, aka pay to slay, is realistic, since that is the only way the international community will support us. We have been trained to forget and ignore the fact that our Arab Muslim neighbors were massacring us here in our ancestral homeland of Israel back in the 1920s and 1930s, decades before the State of Israel was established in 1948, and decades more before Israel liberated Judea and Samaria and Gaza in 1967 and established the first Jewish resettled communities in our ancestral and biblical areas of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Forget history, facts, and justice that prove that the two-state solution is a dangerous delusion that totally misses the problem needed to be solved. We must ignore all that and be realistic. We have been trained to be realistic, that we must accept the existence of a historic people called Palestinians who have a claim to our ancestral homeland, even though British mandate immigration records prove that a vast majority of the Arabs came to this land in the beginning of the 20th century from all over the Middle East, proving that there is no such historic people called Palestinians. All one has to do is check the archives of the New York Times and other media outlets before 1948 to see that all references to Palestinians referred to the Jews. But no, we have to be realistic, ignore reality, and talk about this fake people as if they really exist. But guess what? Over 7 million Jews living in a region of the world surrounded by billions of people who don't want us here is not so realistic. Yet we are here, a thriving Jewish state in a sea of Arab Muslim countries. Winning the War of Independence in 1948 was not realistic. Winning the miraculous Six-Day War and coming back to also miraculously win the Yom Kippur War were not realistic. The Jewish people surviving 2,000 plus years of continuous exile and persecution all over the world to still be here today is not realistic. It is time that we remember and internalize the famous line of founding Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, and I quote, "In Israel, in order to be a realist, you must believe in miracles." That is the Jewish realism. We are Jews. We are the Jewish people. We are the biggest success story of humanity. A people that returned to our ancestral homeland as sovereign after 2,000 plus years of exile and persecution, and the world calls us the colonizers, the outsiders. We should be the poster child of today's university professors, teaching their students to learn from the Jewish people how to overcome oppression and focus on moving forward and doing good for humanity, instead of teaching them that we, the Jews, and the state of Israel are the epitome of evil in the world today. We are the envy of every indigenous people in the world, as we, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, are the only indigenous nation to have returned as sovereign in our ancestral ancient homeland, back with our holy sites. How is our reality one big miracle? Because of one thing, because of God above. And we can't be embarrassed to say that publicly. Because we defy realism. We are a people with a purpose. That is what we were chosen for. A chosen people with a chosen homeland to fulfill a chosen purpose while living in our ancestral homeland. And that is what we need our leaders to be talking about to us and to the world, not wasting their time fighting the daily barrage of lies spread about us and feeling forced into realistic solutions like Oslo, the Gaza disengagement, which I call the exile, the ceasefires with Hamas and Hezbollah that endanger our lives by kicking the real problems down the road and instead making our situation that much worse. So why is this conference so important? Because I know of other conferences that take place in Israel that ignore our Jewish story and ignore our purpose as a Jewish people resettling our ancestral homeland. Instead, they recycle speakers, world leaders, failed ideas, and failed solutions, all responsible for the disastrous situation that we are in today that brought about the October 7th massacre and that led us to have a small army unprepared to fight the seventh front war we are fighting without Israel's full dependence on the United States, and a situation that we are dependent on fellow Jews around the world having to donate money and purchase supplies for our holy IDF soldiers to have to use to fight this war. Ultimately, October 7th did not have to happen. So many Israelis were out in the streets warning about the disastrous Oslo peace process that brought about terror and death, but not peace. Millions of Israelis were protesting, majority, at least half of Israel, were protesting against the 2005 disengagement from Gaza, warning that it would turn Gaza into a terror base that would endanger all of Israel and not turn Gaza into the Singapore of the Middle East. Half of Israel protested against leaving southern Lebanon, that it would turn that area also into a terror launching pad. But the realistic experts wouldn't listen. Instead, they relied on messianic dreams of peace with terrorists, relied on international promises that have been broken, on diplomatic international resolutions that have been ignored, like 1701 regarding southern Lebanon, and instead on investing in developing defensive technologies to protect us. Still today, most of the realistic political and security experts have yet to admit the horrific mistakes of Oslo, the Gaza disengagement, and the South Lebanon pullout, 9 months into this war that we're fighting on 7 fronts that our security leaders still don't know if we can win. And the biggest mistake of all, ignoring the fact that the Palestinian national identity is the biggest and most successful blood libel in Jewish history, motivating people all over the Western world with no understanding of facts or history to attack Jews and feel socially vindicated for doing so. And again, all being done with the silence of our own leaders, political, security, communal, organizational. This is exactly what we focused upon at our conference last year titled Unmasking Anti-Semitism Behind the Palestinian National Movement. So I want everyone to begin this night thinking big, thinking different, thinking Jewish, and have an open mind to publicly voicing the true Jewish realism and solutions that we need to develop the true independence as a sovereign nation to defend ourselves properly and fulfill our purpose as the Jewish people back sovereign in our ancestral homeland. We might not be able to implement these solutions tonight, tomorrow, next month, or next year. But I promise you one thing. If we do not start talking out loud proudly about what we really need to do, then it definitely will never happen. The change starts with us talking about what really, truly needs to be done. And it starts by reminding our leaders who we are and why we live here in our ancestral homeland, because many of them, unfortunately, need to be reminded.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.